Good afternoon and welcome to this new webinar created and organized by the Research Foundation Flanders, better known of course as FWO. I'm Hans Willems, Secretary General of FWO, and together with three of my colleagues, Olivier, Anne and Alexandra, we will guide you this afternoon through the evaluation and selection procedure of the research project Fundamental Research. First of all, I would like to address a special welcome to all the new panel members that we have among us. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation of becoming a member of one of our expert panel members. We realize that we ask a lot of your time and efforts, but be assured that for the Flemish science community, it's really an added value and it's really a plus to have the most excellent experts among our evaluators. So thank you very much already at the beginning of this webinar. And with that, we are at the same time at the target group of this webinar. These are the new, but also the current expert panel members of our evaluation panels around the research project Fundamental Research. This afternoon, you will learn about the evaluation and selection process, your specific task as a panel member, and during this webinar, we will focus on the panel roles, the scoring approach, the rebuttal, in short, every specific step during the evaluation process. We will incorporate also the feedback that we have received from you and your colleagues in previous rounds, and so that all together will form the basis of this webinar. Of course, afterwards, more details can be found on the program web pages on our website. Also there you can find the specific regulations and also a lot of extra documentation about the evaluation process. I would like to remind you that this is an interactive webinar, so you can make use of the question button on the right-hand side of your screen. If you ask a question, we will do our best to incorporate as many as possible during this webinar, but be assured that afterwards we will send you a specific email with all the answers on all possible questions raised during this webinar. This being said, we are ready to kick off, and unfortunately, we all need to include again this year this slide in our presentation. The COVID-19 crisis, for the moment, there's still some impact, of course, and there was a huge impact the previous months and years before the applicants can submit their application. This crisis may have an impact on their life, on their research, on their career, and also the career of the applicants. So we have invited our applicants to include as much details and as much information as possible in the application form. And we would like to ask you as an evaluator to take this information into account in your assessment later on in the process. COVID-19 also has an influence on the panel meetings itself, because at this moment it's uncertain what the winter 2021 will bring us. So we have taken the decision that for the evaluation panels of the research project, we will go through an online format. So there will not be a physical meeting in Brussels, but we will do it online. The meetings are scheduled in November 2022, and for the moment, it's really uncertain what these months will bring also here in Belgium and maybe in other countries across Europe and the globe. On the agenda this afternoon, we will start with some short context, and afterwards we will go into detail about the evaluation and selection process, and then step by step we will guide you through your specific task as a panel member. Before I give the floor to my colleagues, I would like to give you the general context in which FWO functions as a research council. FWO was established in 1928, at that time one of the first research councils in Europe, and our main mission actually since then is still the same. We are the main agency in Flanders for the funding of fundamental and strategic basic research. In order to do so, we have a wide range of funding programs offering and aiming on individual researchers with the fellowships, research teams with, among others, the research projects under discussion here this afternoon. We are also responsible for the funding of research infrastructure, and together with some partners in industry and other private foundations, we also award scientific prizes and awards. The way we do things at FWO is mainly based on the bottom-up principle. So researchers can come to us with new innovative ideas, and our expert panels will evaluate and will stand for the scientific evaluation of these proposals. So we don't point out specific topics, specific teams. It's all up to the researchers, and we are covering all disciplines, so humanities, medical sciences, social sciences, science and technology, biology. All these disciplines can submit applications towards FWO. Scientific excellence is key, and it's also an inter-university competition. Also included research institutes like VIB, IMEC, and so on can also submit applications to us. And but it's a hard and harsher competition, and we'll come back to that on the next slide. FWO also stands for transparent and equal opportunities. So also on that point, you can find much more information on our website about research integrity and all these other interesting topics. FWO functions each year again with an annual budget of 450 million euro. 3/4 of that budget is spent to fundamental research, and you see on the graphs also strategic basic research, clinical research, and infrastructure are among the different topics. When we take a look at this budget from another angle, then you see that almost 70% of our budget is going to the funding of research projects. So the funding scheme on the discussion here this afternoon is also among these 70%. When we take a closer look on that element, you can see that FWO today stands for the funding directly and indirectly of more than 4,500 researchers, which makes us one of the largest players in Belgium. And last year, we were able to fund approximately 270 new research projects, 90 junior projects, and 180 approximately senior projects for a total budget of 120 million euro. In 2021, so last year, we had approximately 1,400 running projects with a scientific staff of almost 2,000 FTEs and a technical staff of 300, approximately 300. When we look at the divisions of the gender balance, then you see that almost 1/3 of the projects as a female PI. So that's an important element, and we have different trajectories running for the moment to increase that number of female PIs even. And in general, in global, you see that the selection rate last year was approximately 21%. So more or less 1 out of 5 applications receive funding at the end of the process. For now, we are not exactly sure what the percentage will be in 2022, but you can assume that it will be more or less the same, maybe a bit more, but not much. So I think 1 out of 5 is a good guidance also for this call. So this was the context at the beginning of this webinar. I'm glad to give the floor now to Olivier to guide you through the further evaluation process. Olivier.
Yes, thank you, Hans. So let's give an overview of the project program. You will notice that we have 2 types of projects, junior and senior. Junior is for candidates with a maximum of 12 years of PhD seniority on the submission date being the 1st of April, and senior is more than that amount. But we have equal success rates and an identical procedure for both types. All candidates are affiliated to a Flemish university or another main institution, and co-institutions are optional. We will come to the brief projects where we are talking about a special category. The eligibility is checked by the FWO before the evaluation starts. So you can be sure that every candidate who is on your table is eligible. So the discussion should not be on that issue anymore. So a project has in principle a duration of 4 years with a minimum of 2 years. It can also be a continuation of a previous project. We do not have a separate program for that kind of projects, and candidates are expected to explain whether this is the case. The budget for a project for staff and consumables taken together is between 45,000 and 130,000 euros per year per host institution. For partners, we can lower that limit to 0 or 20,000 euros a year, mostly because they don't wish to hire staff. So these are exceptions that are possible. For equipment, we have a separate budget, 150,000 euros for the entire project, and so the entire duration and all institutions or partners taken together. And maximum 10% of the total budget can go to a non-Flemish research institution. That is the budget applied for. New is that this year you will see in your evaluation forms an option to provide comment on the budgets. Budgets as such are not a criterion, but we would like you to make comments if you think, for instance, that a budget is exaggerated and should better be cut. So, as I said, we have a special type WEAVE projects. Those projects are part of the set of projects presented to your panel, and a WEAVE project is a joint bilateral or trilateral integrated research project, including a Flemish team and an Austrian, Walloon, German, Luxembourg, Polish, Slovenian, and or a Swiss team eligible at a funding agency in their home country. It is submitted as a junior senior research project, so the same division in types applies here. It is also working with a single submission and evaluation procedure, so it is evaluated at FWO or if we are for those projects where we are a partner at the foreign agency, but the ones that are on your table, there FWO is the lead agency. And as a result, it goes in competition with regular junior research projects of FWO, as we explained. So when granted, the FWO will pay the Flemish partner and the foreign funder will pay the foreign partner. So these WEAVE projects should be treated like any other of the junior and senior applications at FWO for those files that you will find in your panel. So we use the same evaluation criteria as our projects, and please note that the foreign part, including the applicants, is also part of the evaluation because it's an entire project. So the Flemish and the non-Flemish research is taken together. They will also be ranked together with all the other proposals. The foreign budget should also be looked at, and if it is not properly scientifically motivated, also here budget cuts can be proposed, just as is the case with the FWO funding. And it's important to note that the feedback to be submitted by the rapporteur should include the reasons for the funding of a WEAVE application sufficiently, and the involved foreign funders ratify the FWO funding proposal based on that motivation. So that is the reason why we need a very solid motivation. And also, please do submit it as soon as possible after the panel meeting so we can ensure a swift ratification process at the involved foreign funder. So for the panels of the fundamental research, we use the following structure. We have, apart from the fellowships for PhD students and postdocs, separate panels for the projects. These consist of a set of 31 panels, just as is the case for the fellowships, 30 in 5 scientific domains and 1 interdisciplinary panel, a cross-domain panel. These include 12, exceptionally 14 members, including the scientific chair, and more than half of them have a non-Flemish affiliation. So these are really international panels. They are led by 2 chairs, a scientific chair. This is a panel member always with a non-Flemish affiliation, will take the lead during the scientific discussions, and the administrative chair, who is an FWO staff member, and sees to the process, procedures, regulations, can also give information and help the panel members in that respect. It's for the applicants themselves to choose the panel that best fits their application. Therefore, we publish panel scopes And for the interdisciplinary panel, we have an acceptance criteria decision tree. So that's a tool on our website that helps them deciding whether it is really interdisciplinary according to our definition of interdisciplinary research. So it's the responsibility of the applicant to make sure that the application lands in the right panel. If there is a panel consensus on it that the application is out of scope of the panel where it has been submitted, then on that basis, and I repeat, only when there is consensus in the panel, on that basis, the application can be rejected.
Oops. I think this is now me, Olivier.
Yes, I think so. This is now for Anne. So I give the floor to my colleague Anne for the overview of the selection process.
Thank you, Olivier. So this is a two-step selection process. In the first step, we have remote assessments. Two external reviewers are approached. They are on-topic specialists and they write a review independently of one another. And then two panel members independently of one another and of the external reviewers also write a review of the application. These 4 reviews are sent to the applicant or the applicant team, who are given the opportunity to rebut the comments made in these reviews, but they can only comment on specific comments in the review. So the rebuttal is only meant for correction or clarification. They cannot expand the original project proposal. These 5 documents, the 2 external reviews, the 2 panel member reviews and the rebuttal are then sent on to the panel rapporteur. This is another panel member who writes a kind of synthesis of all of these documents, comparing them to one another, and who proposes scores that form the beginning of the discussion of the application at the panel meeting. And this is the second step of the review process. The panel meets. The last few years, this has been a virtual meeting, and this will be the case in 2022 as well due to the pandemic. But in ideal circumstances, the panel meeting is an in-person panel meeting that takes place in Brussels and typically takes a full day. During the panel meeting, all panel members discuss all applications and they give a score in consensus, taking into account all elements on the table. On the basis of these scores, the applications are ranked, a number of them are selected for funding, and a number of them are rejected. That is the basic structure.
Yeah, I seize the opportunity to ask 2 questions submitted by our viewers. The first one is going back actually a few slides ago about the budget of the project. In terms of commenting upon the budget, is it possible to give us, the panel members, some information about what is considered normal for a PhD student, for example? Because of course, and we know that systems differ a lot, and it would be a pity if he would be set up in a wrong way.
Yes, this information will indeed be available and be made available as part of the evaluation form that you can fill out. You will be able to click on a link and a pop-up will appear that will give you some information as to what to expect in terms of numbers in the funding that are appropriate in the Flemish context. And should you have additional questions as you're dealing with your reviews, these are really questions that you can send to your administrative chair of your panel if you're feeling a little bit out of the water there.
Thank you. And then the second question is about the eligibility check. Do the administrative restrictions, for example, 12 years of postdoc, 10% maximum budget for foreign organizations and so on, get checked before sending to us, the evaluators, or do these get screened away before?
No, they are checked before you see any of the applications. So all of the applications that land on your table that you get to see are applications that meet our eligibility criteria in terms of budget, in terms of anything that is relevant. So these are not issues that you should directly be concerned with. We give them as background information so that you know, for example, in the junior competition, that you are only dealing with PIs and with a research team that have their PhD 12 years or less. But it is checked, any application that you see meets our eligibility criteria. So in the evaluation and the selection process, we ask you to look at two main factors, and this is the research team and the project proposal itself. The research team counts for 25% of the total weight, and here we ask you to take into account their scientific capacity, their track record, and how they are collaborating in this project. The project proposal itself takes 75% of the total score, and here we'll ask you to look at two sub-criteria: the scientific quality, relevance, and originality of the proposal, as well as the quality of the research approach and its feasibility. As was mentioned before, we also ask you to look at the budget. This is in and of itself not a criterion, so you cannot say, for example, let's fund this or let's not fund this project because it asks for a lot of money or it has a very low budget. However, we do ask you to consider whether the budget is appropriate in relation to the research that the applicants are proposing. And so that's why we, from this year on, have implemented a text field in the evaluation form in which you can write some comments on the budget if you have any. And as you know, the panel can advise the FWO Board of Trustees to cut in a particular budget applied for if you feel that this is appropriate, if the applicants have applied for too much money according to your evaluation. The evaluation process has also been expanded somewhat to include concerns on what we call the second axis. And the general idea here is that we want to broaden our views on diverse research and researcher profiles. This is an international movement. FWO is not the only organization taking part in this general idea to kind of expand on the concept of what is a good researcher and a good research profile. We want to go beyond the classic output, and we want to include a kind of narrative on someone's researcher profile, and we want to expand our definition of what the impact of good research and a good researcher may be. So one of the things that we have done for this call is change a little bit the format of the publication list as it is presented to you. In the past, this publication list had a subsection A1.1 and A1 and A1.12, and this has been reformed into just A1 publications, which are the peer review articles. And then there are different sections in the publication list that are other types of publications and other types of output that we think can be valuable to researchers and their profile as well. So what we generally want you to do in your evaluation is to include these other types of output and other types of impact and other types of researchers profiles. We've also included comments on this in the scoring grid that we ask you to use as you are giving form to your evaluation and your scores. So please think about this as you are evaluating the projects under consideration. Next slide, please. So these are the scoring grids that I was talking about. So for each of the two main criteria that we ask you to look at, the team and the project, we have developed scoring grids where we have given you the scores that you can give out and then the descriptors of these scores. And what you should do before you start your evaluations is read these scoring grids in detail so that you know what kind of qualities a particular application should possess and should display in order to receive which scores. And as you can see, the scores go from 0 to 7 or from D to A+. Each individual reviewer will give individual scores using the same scoring grid. During the panel meeting, the final panel scores will be given, and these will be given in consensus. And the scores are, as I indicated before, are weighted. So the team counts for 25% and the project counts for 75% of the total weighted score that an application receives. Next, the roles in the panel. So a number of our panel members, most of our panel members are individual panel members. And then, as Olivier indicated before, there are also two chairs, a scientific chair and an administrative chair. Let's take a brief look at what all of these different people do in the panel. So first of all, a panel member. Most of our panels have 11 to 13 panel members, and your main task is to compose the evaluation reports. And you can do this in there are two types of evaluation reports. There are internal evaluator reports, and these are the basic reports that you write in the first step of the evaluation process. We offer you a template and a scoring grid that you can use to complete these reports. You write them independently of anybody else, either another panel member or external reviewers. As a panel member, you can also be asked to act as a rapporteur, and here your role is to write a summary, a kind of summary of the other reports, also taking into account the rebuttal formulated by the applicants. So as a rapporteur, you have a kind of meta view on all of the reports submitted and the response to this by the applicant, and you can comment on this in your report. If you are a rapporteur, you will also be asked to complete the feedback report that is sent to the applicant after the conclusion of the review procedure. The feedback report should not reflect your own personal opinion of a particular application, but the consensus panel opinion as this was formulated during the discussion at the panel meeting. But the report is of course based on your rapporteur report that you wrote before this meeting. Panel members will also be asked to play a role in the review of reports from ongoing or recently finished projects. This is something that is dealt with entirely via email and that you will receive more information about in the emails that we send you. And as a panel member, you're of course expected to attend the panel meeting. When it can be in Brussels, it is in Brussels, but this year, as was indicated before, it will be online again. Please note that we expect you to attend the full panel meeting. We know that this can be challenging, particularly with the differences in time zones, and we can of course excuse you for this, but otherwise we expect you to free up your schedule and to attend the full panel meeting. Keep in mind that our review processes are comparative processes in which we compare candidates to one another and applications to one another in the end to set up a ranking deciding who does and who does not receive the funding. If you can only partake in part of the panel meeting, it is very difficult for you to in a meaningful way participate in this comparative process. So please make sure that you keep your schedule free for the day of the panel meeting and that you can attend the meeting in full, for which we thank you in advance. So if you are appointed as a rapporteur, you have a bit more responsibility than when you're simply the reviewer of an application. You write a kind of synthesis report and the feedback report that is sent to the applicants. The synthesis report will form the start of the discussion during the panel meeting, and it will also perhaps give us some idea of the conclusions by the panel in the end, that the panel will reach in the end. The rapporteur in writing this report weighs the other reviewers' comments and their scores, and you compare them to one another, and then you also take into account the response to these comments by the applicant in the rebuttal, and you put all of this together and you write a kind of meta review or summary, if you will. This can include your own opinion if you have sufficient competence on the particular topic of the application, but make sure that you don't simply write a fifth review. That's not what a rapporteur should do. A rapporteur should really look at all of the different review reports that came in and the rebuttal and put them all together. On the basis of the comparing of the different opinions, you can propose a score for the team and for the project, and this score will form the basis of the discussion in the panel. The score that you propose as a rapporteur has a lot of influence because it determines the initial position of a particular project in the ranking, and this can of course be influential. Your score can deviate from the median reporters' scores, from the median scores that were already given, but if you deviate, you should probably prepare a sound argumentation as to why you do this. But you can certainly do this. If you were not able to do this, we could of course just ask a computer to compile these scores, and we don't do that. We ask a panel member to individually look at all of these applications and propose these scores that will then form the beginning of the discussion. So keep in mind, the rapporteur's synthesis report is not a fifth report on the same footing as the other reports, but it goes beyond this and really forms the start of the panel discussion. The synthesis report is then later, after the panel meeting, turned into the basis of the feedback report, but it should be adapted to reflect what was added to the discussion during the panel meeting. And it should also contain specific comments made by reviewers, if you will, but also reflect the consensus opinion of the panel. So it's not a reflection of your own personal opinion on the application. It is very, very important that the feedback reports always mentions the rebuttal if the applicants submitted a rebuttal, because of course they must be assured that their rebuttal was taken into account during the evaluation process of their application. Then there is a scientific chair in the panel. This person will lead the scientific discussion and is always an international panel member. So they will provide scientific guidance. They are the people that appoint the internal evaluators and the rapporteurs on the basis of your expertise and your potential conflicts of interest that you indicate at the very beginning of the evaluation process. This is something we'll discuss later. The scientific chair also prepares the panel meeting and will make sure that they know really what is going on and where the discussion should perhaps focus. They will make sure that there's a clear picture of, for example, significance variations between final scores of evaluation reports, the top, the middle, and the bottom of the ranking, etc., etc. The scientific chair, of course, chairs the panel meeting itself. They also monitor feedback reports, something that you'll be sent an email about, and they monitor the reports of the ongoing and the recently finished projects, something that you also will be sent an email about. Then finally, the administrative chair. This is somebody in the panel who's an FWO staff member. Each staff member typically is the administrative chair of several panels, and they provide procedural guidance. They, for example, know a lot about conflicts of interest. What are they? How should you deal with them? They make sure that there's a correct application of the assessment criteria, that we all use the scoring grids as they are supposed to be used, and they ensure that there is an adherence to all FWO regulations during the entire review and evaluation process, including the panel meeting. The administrative chair prepares the panel meeting together with the scientific chair and also plays a role in monitoring the feedback reports. We read all of the feedback reports that you submit to us before we send them to the applicants, and we may get back to you if we think that your feedback report needs some additional information. And administrative chairs also monitor the reports of the ongoing and the recently finished projects. Sorry, Hans, I think you're still muted. I can see you, but I can't hear you.
Correct. Thank you, Anne, for noticing. Yeah, we received from different viewers actually the same question. How are the external referees selected exactly?
This is done by a partner organization, ESF, with whom we work, and they select external reviewers on the basis of their expertise. They should really be on-topic experts on the particular topic of the application. So their role is really to provide specific comments on the topic of the application, and they really look in depth at the application. Typically, external reviewers only look at one application and provide from their own backgrounds and from their own expertise an evaluation of this. What they do not do, and what panel members do is compare applications to one another. So in to that extent, external reports have a somewhat of a different approach perhaps than internal reports from other panel members whom are aware of the other applicants and applications in the panel. This is not the case for external evaluators, who really know a lot typically about the application that they write a review on, but who have no idea about the other applications that this application is in competition with. So next slide, please. Finally, the timeline of this entire procedure. The applications were submitted to us beginning of April, and they will be sent to you by the second half of May. And this time in between is a time we take precisely to check the eligibility that some of you had some questions about earlier. So the eligibility check takes the entire month of April and the first couple of weeks of May for us to really make sure that all of the applications that we send on to you are eligible and meet our criteria. So the remote evaluation process takes place between April and October. So first we give you the opportunity to write your internal evaluation reports. The external evaluators are also at work. You submit these to us by the end of the summer, end of August. The first couple of weeks of September, Applicants are given the opportunity to write their rebuttal. The rebuttal and the reports are then sent to the rapporteurs in the panel who write the synthesis reports, which should be done by October. And panel meetings take place this year in the second half of October and throughout November. And then at the beginning of December, our Board of Trustees will make a formal decision on the granting of the new applications to be funded. So now we welcome you to take a look at a brief clip from our colleagues at the Royal Society concerning raising awareness of unconscious bias in reviews.
The unconscious mind is amazing. It can process vastly more information than our conscious mind by using shortcuts based on our background, cultural environment, and personal experiences to make almost instantaneous decisions about everything around us. The snag is, it's wrong quite a lot of the time, especially on matters that need rational thinking. Here's a classic example. A bat and a ball cost £1 10p. If the bat costs £1 more than the ball, how much does the ball cost? Most people, including over 50% of students at some of the world's leading universities, get the answer wrong and say 10p. The answer is actually 5p. Many of us choose 10p without thinking. This is because our unconscious mind uses instinct, not analysis. So our unconscious is fallible. It's also biased. It makes snap judgments of people we meet, categorizing them according to gender, social and other characteristics. In milliseconds, we judge whether somebody is like us and belongs to our in-group. These are the people we favor. So men might favor men, while women might favor women. However, we can belong to different in-groups, and we like to be part of an in-group that's powerful, which could mean a woman favoring a man over a woman. That's unconscious bias. All of us have it, and it colors our decisions without our realizing. For example, research reveals that if I were a man, you would be more likely to be nodding in agreement right now, because people pay more attention to a male voice. The Royal Society fosters excellence in science, but this can only be achieved if we select from the widest range of talent. And that's not possible if unconscious bias is narrowing down the field for non-scientific reasons. To lessen the impact of unconscious bias, which is easier for us to notice in others, we are raising the awareness of unconscious bias to members of our selection and appointment panels. We're encouraging panel members to deliberately slow down decision-making, reconsider reasons for decisions, question cultural stereotypes, and monitor each other for unconscious bias. We can't cure unconscious bias, but with self-awareness, we can address it.
All right, welcome back, everyone. In the next slides, I will guide you through a step-by-step overview of the tasks to perform as a panel member. So here we have an overview of the 7 steps that you will have to take, and those can be divided into 3 main groups. First of all, the preparation, of which we start here with followed by a remote evaluation phase, and then finally a panel meeting. But let's start with the first phase of the preparation. And this is accessing your gateway to the FWO, the e-portal. This e-portal you can access via our website, fwo.be, or you can directly access it via fwoweb.fwo.be. Here you can log in via your login credentials, and then the main aspect that you will have to look into is on the dashboard, the panel member tab, where you can find all the relevant information considering the evaluation of the applications. So what you will have to do in this e-portal is indicate the conflicts of interest and the confidence rate. So for many of the panels, this step has already been done. So you will receive an email with an overview of the applications and an invitation to indicate potential conflicts of interest for each application. Some of these conflicts of interest may have already been filled in for you. This is the case if you have conflicts of interest on an institutional level. So this is mainly the case for Flemish researchers. We also ask you to indicate your confidence rate per application on a scale of 1 to 5. Here, I would like to stress that it's important to mind the code of conduct as a panel member during the full process. So as a first point, as a panel member, you act as an independent researcher and not as a representative of your host institution. So not a representative of the university you belong to. So if you're contacted by an applicant, always refer them to the FWO. Any information about the evaluation procedure can only come from the FWO, and also notify the FWO that you have been contacted by a researcher. It's important never to disclose any confidential information or any information at all about the evaluation procedure directly to a researcher who asks for it. Step 3 of the steps as a panel member is the assignment of internal evaluation reports. So the scientific chair will assign applications to you as a panel member, taking into account your confidence rates that you have supplied in the previous step, but also assuming some generalist experience in the area of your panel of which you are a member, and also taking the conflicts of interest that you have submitted into account. For each application, the chair will appoint 2 internal reviewers and 1 rapporteur. Next slide, please.
Yeah,
yes, Hans?
Alexandra, before we go to the next slide, we have actually received 2 sets of questions. One is when will the exact panel dates be announced? Several viewers have asked that question. The second question, also in connection with the slide you just explained, how many projects would Flemish panel members or panel members in general evaluate on average?
Mm-hmm. So for the first question, you should already have received the dates of the panel meeting a few months ago from our colleagues who are writing from the email address expert@fwo.be. But given that we are receiving a lot of questions about this, we will make sure to send a reminder about this in the next days after this webinar as well, so that you are indeed aware of which days to keep available in October, November. And then the second question, this can differ really quite a lot depending on, so this question is about how many reports will I have to write as a panel member? And this really depends strongly on which panel of which you are a member, since the number of applications submitted to each panel differs quite widely. So this can go from 8 up until 20 reviews over the 2 different periods of evaluation. So there is one main period during the summer, let's say, that starts in June and ends mid-August. So 2/3 of the applications appointed to you will have to be evaluated in that period. So you will have a clear deadline for that. And then you will also have a period in which you will be evaluating applications as a rapporteur, and that is a bit later in the whole session. So in general, we can't really say the exact amount, but you will hear this in the following months. Okay, so step 4 is then indeed preparing the evaluation report. So what is expected here? You will receive an invitation and guidelines to evaluate applications assigned to you as a reviewer on the one hand and as a rapporteur on the other hand. If there is a problem, for example, you notice a conflict of interest at the last moment after you've already indicated the COI information, you can still refuse a certain application, but do contact your chair's administrative and scientific chair first so that you can explain the situation. Please closely respect the submission deadline. This is very important for us so that the evaluation procedure can take place as planned. There are two different deadlines for the reviewer, internal review reports, and the rapporteur reports. So in your reports, please be concise, but add value. Do not copy paste parts of the proposal. For example, if someone has 35 publications, do not indicate this person has 35 publications, but indicate whether you think this is a strong or a weak publication record. Substantiate the appreciation and the scores. Highlight the strengths and the weaknesses. And as Anne explained previously, use the score grids when giving scores. So you can, as of this year, give scores with an accuracy of 0.5. So this is new compared to last year when you could only give, for example, a 6 or a 7. Now you can also give a 6.5. Also, an important note that we want to give you this year is not to expect letters of support in the application. So the absence of a letter of support is not something that you should see as a potential weakness or flaw in an application. The idea is that there should be no letters of support in an application. Okay, so when preparing the internal evaluation reports, as Anne mentioned, there are two main criteria. First, the research team, where you will be evaluating scientific capacity, track record, and collaboration. And on the other hand, we have the project, where you have two main criteria for which you will give separate scores. First of all, scientific quality, relevance, and originality. And on the other hand, approach and feasibility. So for all these criteria, we ask you to use the score grids when giving a score. In parallel with the work that you are doing, there are also external evaluation reports being written. So simultaneously with the two internal evaluators, two external evaluators will write reports for each application. And those are written by on-topic specialists, as Anne already highlighted, selected by ESF, Science Connect. And we want to highlight one thing in that context as well. As an FWO panel member, you're not allowed to act as an external reviewer. So if you would be contacted by ESF to review for FWO, please do decline the invitation. This doesn't, it's not the idea that you would be doing this. That is then an administrative error. So the external evaluators work in parallel and independently from the internal evaluators, so that in total there are 4 independent opinions on each application. The external evaluators use the same scoring system and criteria as the internal evaluators. And the external reviews are also presented to the applicants so that they can respond to that in the rebuttal. And they will also be given to the rapporteur in the next phase. So after the 4 reports have been written, so the 2 internal and the 2 external evaluation reports, these are sent in full to the applicants in the first half of September. This is done anonymously and without showing the scores. The applicants can then react with comments on factual errors or on misunderstandings in a maximum of 3 pages. And these reactions are presented to the rapporteur, so he or she can take them into account together with the 4 reports when making a synthesis report and also proposing a synthesis score. So as mentioned in the rebuttal, there should be no new arguments or mainly no elaboration of the proposal. So it's not the idea that you have a new aspect of the proposal coming up or a new plan for experiments. If that is the case, these new additions should not be taken into account by the rapporteur. And then step 5, we have the preparation of the synthesis report by the rapporteur. So they take the 4 reports, the 2 internal and the 2 external reviews into account, both the reports as well as the scores, and then write a synthesis report and also propose scores that will be used at the start of the panel meeting. So they will take the rebuttal into account. This is very important. And also here, as mentioned, it's crucial to I see that the screen is changing a bit. Yeah, it's important to submit synthesis reports by the deadline so that the whole evaluation procedure can go ahead as planned. So for the next steps, as the actual panel meeting, my colleague Olivier will give a further explanation of the process.
Yes, thank you, Alexandra. So during the panel meeting, the panel will discuss the files and also the assessments of them, and will decide on the scoring. So as I already mentioned earlier, you should also take the budget into account. It is not a criterion, but it is certainly an item that is open for discussion and also for comment to make in the text box in your evaluation forms. So during the panel meeting, you can of course assign new scores based on the consensus of the entire panel. So you can you should not stick to the scores that have been given by the rapporteurs. It is a collective decision by the panel to give the final scores. At the end of the session, we will have a ranking with showing us which projects are granted and which are rejected. So you can grant up to the panel budget, not more. And you can also assign 2 reserve projects. Those 2 reserve projects will go to our reserve list. And on the base of the screen,
currently something went wrong with the connection of Olivier. So, but as he was indicating before, at the end of the session, you need to come up as a panel with the final ranking and also take the decision about the granting of rejection. You can have your dedicated panel budget. So the success rate among all disciplines at FWO is exactly the same. It's a percentage that we have shown you on the first screen. And of course, as a panel, you can also assign 2 reserve projects. In total, we will have a general ranking and a general overview of all reserve projects across all expert panels. And based on these reserve lists, we will also fund additional projects. So it's perfectly possible that at the end of the session, you have a dedicated set of projects that receive funding for sure, but afterwards, at the really end of the process, when our board takes the final decision, then it's also possible that some additional projects will be funded based on the available budget for the call in general. Of course, as already pointed out by Alexandra and Anne, we need to deal with a lot of applications, so the time management is crucial, but I'm sure that the scientific chair and also administrative chair will assist you in that aspect. And then we are almost at the end of the procedures with the feedback. We send feedback to all candidates, whether they have received funding or not. Feedback is very relevant, of course, because it helps our applicants in order to submit a new application in cases they are not funded. So for next call, for next year, it's very useful. The feedback is also part of the reputation of FWO, and also the reputation of the expert panels is at stake. We see that when we receive an appeal, for example, from a funding decision, because that's also possible that some of the applicants submit an appeal to FWO. In these cases, it's very often based on a lack of feedback or not sufficient feedback. So please add value, but be concise, of course, but add value. Point out the strong and the weaknesses within specific applications. And also, if you have as a panel or panel member some suggestions for improvement, please include them in your feedback. So feedback should not be a copy-paste of data from the application itself. And you also need to take into account that we add already the rebuttal phase. So the applicants know already what the internal and external reviewers have said about their application. So within this feedback letter, we need to come back to the final discussions of the panel and also the final funding decision, why a specific application is funded or not funded. So the feedback, but of course we will assist you that during the evaluation process, the file manager will contact you with all the necessary details, but we ask you to submit feedback 1 week after your panel member and take into account, as been pointed out, the different elements that taking part in the discussions during your panel meeting. This brings us almost to the end of this webinar. If you are interested in further reading, we have on our website a lot of documents. You can also find there this PowerPoint presentation. Also, the webinar itself will be recorded and will be submitted to our website. But you can find many additional documents about the general regulations of project of fundamental research, the scoring grids, and so on. But if you still have additional questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. You see here the different email addresses used by each of the specific panels or disciplines within FWO. So if you have any questions, please submit them to us, and then we will do our best to come up with a response or a solution or help as quickly as possible. With that, we are at the end of this webinar. I would like to thank you all for your attentions. Our apologies for some of the technical difficulties that we have experienced this afternoon. I have seen that some of you have submitted some other questions, more technical questions. We will come back to them through email, so you can be sure that in the next few days you will receive a specific answer on the remaining questions in the chat box. For now, I would like to thank you for your attention, and of course we hope to see you all back online for the expert evaluation sessions later this year. To conclude this webinar, we have prepared a second short video clip going more into detail about the second axis, the evaluation step that we have introduced this year throughout the different funding schemes of FWO. And it's about the Leiden Manifesto and some extra context about these elements. For now, thank you for your attention and a good afternoon.
More and more, data is used to govern science. Services, databases, and metrics have proliferated. As scientometricians, we have watched with alarm, aware that too many instances fall far short. So we created a roadmap to guide researchers and evaluators toward the best practices in research assessment. 1. Use quantitative evaluation to support, not substitute for, expert assessment. Quantitative metrics can strengthen peer review because making judgments about colleagues is difficult without a range of relevant information. But indicators don't substitute for informed judgment. 2. Measure performance in accordance with the research missions of the institution. Research for advancing the frontiers of academic knowledge differ from research focused on delivering solutions to societal problems. No single evaluation model applies to all contexts. Instead, reviews should either be based on academic notions of excellence or the benefit to policy, industry, or the public. 3. Protect excellence in locally relevant research. In many parts of the world, research excellence is equated with English language publication. Metrics based on high-quality, non-English literature would serve to identify and reward excellence in locally relevant research. 4. Keep data collection and analytical processes open, transparent, and simple. Databases used in evaluation should be constructed according to clearly stated rules set before the research has been completed, until recently a common practice. In 2010, public debate on the technical properties of an important indicator led to a revision in the calculation of this indicator. Recent commercial entrants should be held to these standards. No one should accept black box evaluation machines. 5. Allow those evaluated to verify data and analysis. To ensure data quality, all researchers included in bibliometric studies should be able to check that their outputs have been correctly identified. Accurate, high-quality data take time and money to collate and process. Budget for it. 6. account for variation by field in publication and citation practices. In humanities, there are few citations and they accumulate slowly. In biomedical sciences, there are many citations, accumulating quickly. Citation rates vary by field. Normalized indicators are required, and the most robust normalization method is based on percentiles, number of top papers in the top 1% in a field, for example. 7. Assess individual researchers using qualitative judgment of their portfolio. Relying on one number, even the H-index is a one-dimensional view. Reading and judging a researcher's work gives the full picture. 8. Avoid misplaced concreteness and false precision. The journal impact factor is published to 3 decimal places to avoid ties. However, given the conceptual ambiguity and random variability of citation counts, it makes no sense to distinguish between journals based on very small impact factor differences. Avoid false precision. Only 1 decimal is warranted. 9. Recognize systemic effects of assessment and indicators. Indicators establish incentives. People respond and the system changes. Anticipate these effects. This means that a suite of indicators is always preferable. A single one will invite gaming and goal displacement. 10. Scrutinize indicators regularly and update them. Research missions and assessment goals shift over time, and the research system itself co-evolves. Once useful metrics become inadequate, new ones emerge. Indicator systems have to be reviewed and updated. Abiding by these principles, decision-making about science can be based on high-quality processes, informed by the highest quality data. Go online to read the full manifesto.